Hi, Angus. It's Dan here in Abu Dhabi. Also wanted to jump in with a question on Lebanon. You pointed out before that Lebanon is chasing a $10 billion loan from the IMF. It's going to probably need an additional $10 billion just to get the economy and society back on track, and even more money to rebuild Beirut after the blast. Can international donors and the international community get behind this new leadership in Lebanon?
Well, first of all, Dan, we don't have that leadership. We need to see what it is, who's in cabinet, who's in government, what they plan to do. Are they able to have that reform that they can promise? Because they can promise reform, but will they be able to do it? And I think the whole system has been undermined by years of negligence, by corruption, and the fact now the blast has caused the physical damage to Lebanon, which will cost upwards of $5 to $10 billion, perhaps $15 billion to fix. And frankly, the international community at this moment doesn't have that amount of capital. And the IMF and other international financial institutions, and I've spoken to the IMF only a few weeks ago in DC about this, they won't be able to help until there's a real program that's already begun, because there's frustration with Lebanon. So I think we would probably need, Dan, to have another conversation about this in about a month's time. I want it to happen. I want change to happen, but I'm not altogether hopeful at the moment.
Angus, I also wanted to ask you about one of the major geopolitical shifts that we've seen in the region, this rapprochement between the UAE and Israel. We've had Jared Kushner out here as well, obviously touting the success of this deal, at least from an American perspective. How are they going to turn optics into outcomes? We've already seen Saudi Arabia and Bahrain perhaps pushing back on a suggestion that they could get on board with a deal like this, at least before the US election. What's your perspective?
Well, your last point first, I don't think it's likely we're going to see any other Arab state go ahead with normalization at all, definitely before the election, because it's just too politically sensitive, given the proximity of the US election. Added to which there are domestic concerns and issues, which I have to say people outside the region perhaps might not realize, that it's quite difficult to normalize at the moment. But in the case of the Emirates, it's very forward-looking. It's a very brave decision. Probably of all of the states in the region at the moment, they're taking a longer-term, pragmatic view in terms of the major regional changes and also a post-oil future. The fact that the region's still so incredibly dependent on hydrocarbons is a major issue. I was writing about this in the early to mid-90s. It's taken 25 years to begin to solve the problems of this region's dependence on hydrocarbons, and the fact that we still have over 80% of the state of the population of Kuwait, say, working for the government, not far off the same in Saudi Arabia. The fact that citizenry have to also realize that the region needs change. The leadership of the Emirates have done this. I think it'll be a warm peace. That's been said actually by both sides. I think that's positive. I think of all of this, between Jordan and Egypt, the only countries with normalization with Egypt so far, it'll be the Emirates. I think will have the best relationship cross, I think, border help in education, in tech, in high tech. Now that the Emirates has its own successful space program, I also think in agriculture and other issues. So I'm relatively positive about, especially startups, seeing movement of capital in terms of investment. That will, I think, move ahead pretty quickly, and that's a positive sign, I think, for the rest of the region. But I don't think we'll see major change before the US election, and possibly not by the end of the year. Maybe with a new administration, it's possible, but I still think for other countries it'll take time.
One of the other interesting things that happened during Jared Kushner's visit was that journalists, including yours truly, were invited out to the Al Dhafra airbase, which shows to me that clearly some kind of arms deal is in play between the US and the UAE. Of course, these two countries have a long-established military relationship. They've worked together for decades now. But how is the US going to sell the F-35 fighter and other arms to the UAE while also maintaining Israel's qualitative military advantage in the region? This appears to be a key issue, and there's tussling on all sides here. What's going to happen next, in your opinion?
Well, the issue there is the fact that there's Israeli concern over the sale of the F-35s, which the Emirates wants. It's not as if the Emirates haven't asked. They have. They want to buy them. But it seems to be that Prime Minister Netanyahu has put a spanner in the works and said, not at the moment, we don't want them to get a hold of their technology. That's an issue. I think the Emirates are pragmatic enough, the leadership in Abu Dhabi are progressive enough, forward-thinking enough to proceed with other elements of the relationship. But discussions will continue. But again, remember, we're only a few weeks away from the US election. A new administration may decide to have a different course with the Emirates and proceed with the deal. So I think, again, depending upon the outcome of the US election in November, the discussion, therefore, on selling technology may be revivified and move ahead. But that will again be seen from November.